So, did Jimmy Hoffa's enemies bury him under a stadium? It's the question everyone asks. The one theory that became a legend. It's so big, so cinematic, you can almost see it in a movie. The powerful Union boss, a man who tangled with the Kennedys and the Mafia, ends his life as part of the foundation for a football stadium. A final, brutal, concrete insult. The short answer is almost certainly no. But the long answer, the story of why we all think he's there, is the real story. It tells you everything you need to know about the mystery of Jimmy Hoffa. Let's start at the beginning. Who was Jimmy Hoffa? He was the president of the Teamsters Union, and back in the 50s and 60s, that meant he was one of the most powerful men in America. The Teamsters controlled trucking. If the truck stopped, the country stopped. That was Hoffa's power. He was tough, he was charismatic, he was a hero to his union members because he got them good wages and pensions. But there was another side. To get things done, Hoffa made deals. He got into bed with the Mafia. The Teamsters Pension Fund became a personal bank for the mob. They used it to build Las Vegas casinos. They used it for all sorts of shady business. This brought Hoffa a lot of enemies. The biggest one was Robert F. Kennedy, who made it his personal mission to take Hoffa down. And he did. Hoffa went to prison in 1967 for jury tampering and fraud. He didn't serve his full sentence. President Richard Nixon pardoned him in 1971. But there was a condition. Hoffa couldn't be involved in any union activities until 1980. For a man like Jimmy Hoffa, that was a death sentence. The union was his life. He immediately started fighting to get back in control, and this is where things get dangerous. While he was in prison, the mob had gotten very comfortable running the Teamsters through their own puppet leaders. They liked the money, they liked the power, they did not want the loud, stubborn, unpredictable Jimmy Hoffa coming back and messing things up. He was warned. People told him to back off, he didn't listen. On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa drove to a restaurant called the Matthews Red Fox in Bloomfield Township, a suburb of Detroit. He was supposed to meet two men, Anthony Tunney Jack Jackalone, a powerful Detroit mob captain, and Anthony Tunney Provenzano, a Teamsters official from New Jersey with deep mob ties. Hoffa and Tony Pro hated each other. They had a nasty falling out in prison. But this meeting was supposed to be a peacemaking session, a way to clear the air so Hoffa could start his comeback. Hoffa waited. He called his wife from a payphone. He told her they hadn't shown up. He sounded agitated. After that call, Jimmy Hoffa was never seen or heard from again. His car was found in the restaurant parking lot the next day. But Hoffa himself had vanished. The investigation was huge. The FBI was all over it. But they hit a wall of silence. The people who knew what happened weren't talking. The mob has a code, omerta. You don't talk to the cops, ever. So, with no body and no witnesses, theories started to fly. And this is where the stadium comes in. The stadium in question was Giant Stadium in the Meadowlands, New Jersey. It was under construction right around the time Hoffa disappeared. The theory goes like this. Hoffa was killed in Michigan. His body was stuffed into a 55-gallon drum, loaded onto a truck, and driven 1,000 miles to New Jersey. There, his killers dumped the drum into a wet concrete footing of the new stadium. He would be buried forever, a permanent part of the structure. It's a powerful image. It's the ultimate mob message. You don't just disappear, you become part of our world, under our feet. Where did this specific story come from? It came mostly from one man, an informant named Donald Tony the Greek Frankos. Frankos was a mob enforcer and hitman. In the late 1980s, years after the disappearance, he started talking to the FBI and to reporters. He claimed he heard the story directly from the people involved. He gave a very detailed account. He named the killer as an Irish-American mobster named John Sullivan. He said Sullivan told him that he shot Hoffa, dismembered the body, and put it in a drum. Then they drove it to the construction site, which was controlled by Tony Pro's New Jersey crew. They supposedly paid off a crane operator to drop the drum into the foundation of what would become Section 107. The story was explosive, it made headlines everywhere, it was so specific. Section 107. It sounded credible. People latched onto it. The idea of Jimmy Hoffa being buried in the end zone became American folklore. It was a joke on late-night TV, it was a line in movies. Everyone just sort of accepted it as the most likely truth. But the FBI was skeptical. There were a lot of problems with the story. First, the logistics are a nightmare. Killing someone is one thing. Disposing of the body is the hard part. Why would a professional mob crew in Detroit, who had plenty of ways to get rid of a body locally, take such a massive risk? Transporting a body across state lines is a federal crime. It multiplies the risk of getting caught at every single mile marker. A routine traffic stop could unravel the entire conspiracy. It seemed unnecessarily complicated and dangerous. Second, the timeline was extremely tight. Giants Stadium was well into construction by July 1975. Concrete for the foundation in Section 107 had likely already been poured and set. To bury a drum, they would have had to jackhammer out a massive chunk of fresh concrete, drop the drum in, and re-pour it, all without anyone noticing. At a busy union-run construction site, it seems impossible. Third, the source, Donald Frankos, was not exactly reliable. Mob informants often tell authorities what they want to hear. Sometimes they mix truth with fake. Sometimes they make things up entirely to get a better deal for themselves or to settle old scores. His story changed over time. The details got fuzzier. Other mob figures have since said Frankos was a liar who just wanted attention. Despite the doubts the theory wouldn't die, it was just too good a story. For decades, every time the Giants scored a touchdown in that end zone, someone would make a Hoffa joke. The legend grew and grew. Then, in 2004, the TV show Mythbusters decided to test it. They used ground-penetrating radar on the spot where Franco said Hoffa was buried. The radar can detect anomalies under the ground, like a large metal drum. They scanned the area around Section 107. They found nothing. No drum, no disturbance in the concrete. The final nail in the coffin for the stadium theory came when the stadium itself was torn down. In 2010, Giants Stadium was demolished to make way for a new one. The demolition was a slow, careful process. The FBI was watching, journalists were watching, everyone was waiting for a 55-gallon drum to be unearthed from the rubble. They tore the place apart, piece by piece, they crushed the concrete and hauled it away. And they found exactly what the FBI expected to find. Nothing. No drum, no bones. No Jimmy Hoffa. So the most famous theory, the one that became a national punchline, turned out to be a myth. A great story, but just a story. If he wasn't in the stadium, then where was he? This is where the mystery gets darker and, frankly, more realistic. The most likely answer is that Jimmy Hoffa never left Michigan. Or at least, he didn't leave alive. The FBI has always believed the murder happened quickly and close to the scene of the abduction. The trick was getting rid of the body in a way that it would never be found. And for that, there are several powerful theories that are much more plausible than the stadium story. One of the longest-running theories centers on a horse farm. It was a farm in Milford, Michigan, owned by a man named Roland McMaster. And McMaster was a powerful Teamsters official and a known tough guy. The farm was a known hangout for mobsters. The theory was that Hoffa was taken from the restaurant, driven to the farm, and killed in a barn. Then, his body was either buried on the sprawling property or disposed of in some other way. This theory had legs. The FBI took it so seriously that in 2004 they spent 2 weeks and $1 million digging up the farm. They brought in heavy equipment. They tore down a barn. They followed a tip from an informant who said he saw a concrete coffin being buried there years ago. The world watched again, expecting a breakthrough, and again they found nothing. Just dirt and old farm equipment. It was another dead end. This brings us to what many now believe is the most credible theory. It came from the book I Heard You Paint Houses, which was the basis for the Martin Scorsese film The Irishman. The book is the story of Frank the Irishman Sheeran. Sheeran was a union official and a hitman who worked for the Bufalino crime family. He was also a close friend of Jimmy Hoffa. For years, he was like a son to Hoffa. He was his bodyguard and his muscle. On his deathbed, Sheeran confessed to his biographer, Charles Brandt, that he was the one who killed Jimmy Hoffa. His story is chillingly simple and direct. He said he was part of the crew that picked Hoffa up at the restaurant. Hoffa trusted Sheeran, so he got in the car without a fight. They drove him to a nearby house in Detroit, where Hoffa thought he was going to a meeting. When they walked into the house, it was empty. Hoffa realized it was a setup. According to Sheeran, he turned to run, and Sheeran shot him twice in the back of the head. It was quick, it was personal, a betrayal of the highest order. Sheeran said that after the murder, 2 other mobsters came and took the body. They told him it was going to be cremated. A crematorium or an incinerator would leave no evidence. No bones, no DNA, nothing. This method fits the mob's goal perfectly, make the problem disappear completely. For a long time, Sheeran's story was just another story. Another deathbed confession from another old gangster. There have been dozens of them over the years. Everyone wants to be the guy who solved the Hoffa mystery. But then, investigators found the house. The address Sheeran gave matched a real house in Detroit. In 2004, investigators pulled up the floorboards in the exact spot where Sheeran said the murder happened. They found bloodstains. The police did a forensic analysis. They found that the blood was human. They tried to match the DNA to Hoffa's. They got a sample of Hoffa's DNA from a strand of his hair found in a hairbrush. The results were the biggest cliffhanger in the whole saga. The DNA from the bloodstains was too degraded to make a conclusive match. It was old. It couldn't be definitively proven to be Hoffa's, but it also couldn't be ruled out. So we are left with a house, a confession from a man who was in the perfect position to do it, and bloodstains that can't be fully identified. Of all the theories, this one feels the most real. It doesn't have the grand, cinematic feel of the stadium burial. It's just a grubby, sad, and violent end in an empty house, and that feels much closer to the truth of how these things usually happen. There are other theories, of course, lots of them. One theory says he was put in a car and the car was compacted in a scrapyard. The cube of metal was then put on a freighter and shipped to Japan to be melted down and turned into new cars. This is another total disappearance theory. It's efficient and brutal. Another strong theory points back to New Jersey, but not to the stadium. It points to a landfill. Specifically, the PJP landfill in Jersey City, known locally as Moscato's Dump. It was a toxic waste site controlled by associates of Tony Pro. The informant Ralph Picardo, who was one of the first to talk, claimed Hoffa's body was stuffed in a drum and buried deep within the dump. The FBI took this seriously. The dump was a massive, uncontrolled mess of chemicals and garbage. A perfect place to hide something forever, but searching it would be a toxic, dangerous, and nearly impossible task. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack made of poison. They never did a full excavation. Some investigators believe to this day that Hoffa's final resting place is under a mountain of garbage in New Jersey. There are even wilder theories. Some say he was fed to alligators in a Florida swamp. Some say he was ground up and thrown into a river. The list goes on and on. So why do we have so many stories? And why do we keep coming back to the stadium? Part of it is our fascination with the mob. We're drawn to these stories of power, loyalty, and betrayal. The mob operates by its own rules, in a secret world hidden just beneath our own. A mystery like this gives us a peek into that world. Part of it is the man himself. Jimmy Hoffa wasn't just some gangster, he was a major figure in American history. He stood up to presidents. He controlled a vital part of the American economy. For a man that big to simply vanish off the face of the earth is unsettling. It feels wrong. We need an ending to the story, and the stadium theory gave us an ending. It was a big ending for a big man. It was a story that made a kind of mythic sense. The man who built a powerful organization was used as building material for another powerful organization, the NFL. There's a dark poetry to it. The other theories, the more plausible ones, are just grim. A quick murder in a nondescript house, a burial in a toxic landfill, a car crusher. These endings are probably closer to the truth, but they lack the grand narrative. They're just about waste. The waste of a man's life and the ugly business of getting rid of the evidence. The search for Jimmy Hoffa has never officially ended. Every few years, a new tip comes in. A new deathbed confession surfaces. An old gangster gets a conscience. The FBI gets out their shovels and their ground-penetrating radar and follows another lead. They dug up a driveway in 2013. They searched a field in 2022. Each time the news cameras show up. Each time we watch and wonder if this will be the time. And each time they find nothing. The men who ordered the hit are all dead. Tony Giacolone and Tony Pro died in prison, never saying a word about Hoffa. Frank Sheeran is dead. All the key players are gone. They took their secrets with them. So what are we left with? We're left with a ghost, a permanent question mark in American history. And we are left with the legend of the stadium. Even though we know it's not true, it's the story we tell. It's the one that sticks. Because it's not really about the facts anymore, it's about the idea of a secret buried right under our noses. It's about the idea that even the most powerful people can be erased, their legacy reduced to a punchline about a football field. The truth is likely much simpler and much uglier. Jimmy Hoffa almost certainly died on July 30th, 1975, betrayed by men he knew, and his body was disposed of with cold, professional efficiency. His killers did their job well. They made him disappear. But the story, the mystery, they couldn't kill that. And as long as people gather to watch a game, or drive past a construction site, or hear a story about the old days of the mob, someone will ask the question. Hey, you ever hear the one about Jimmy Hoffa and the stadium? And the legend will live on. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the wildest stories are the ones that last the longest, even when they aren't true. They become a kind of truth themselves. They become folklore. And Jimmy Hoffa, the tough-as-nails union boss, has become a permanent part of American folklore. Not buried under a stadium, but buried in our collective memory, forever the man who knew too much and simply vanished. The search for his body may never end. But the search for a good story ended a long time ago. We found it in the Meadowlands even if he was never there.